Welcome to Preaching That Matters, a place you can find apostolic Pentecostal preaching, a place where all generations can be fed with the Word of God. We hope you enjoy.
Well, we're glad to be here today for this Pastor's Institute, and hope you're enjoying it. We've heard a lot of things. Any of you that did not get a copy? Everybody have a copy? Okay. Brother Green, would you have? Anybody else? There's another one back there. There are a few typographical errors on this. On the first page, just underneath the 8 items there, in the second line, it's supposed to be seldom, and then the third paragraph is supposed to be spiritual, fifth word there. I'm sorry I didn't have time to get all these corrected. I was running late. Page 2, there's paragraph 3, the third line, I've got what are the movies, it looks like, M-O-V-I-E-S, should be motives. Seems like sometimes our errors can come up with peculiar contractions. Page 3, item 6, next to the last line, it should be communicates instead of communicated. And then the 2 lines above it in parentheses should be overseer. Sorry, I was so lethargic in getting that. Praise the Lord. We'd like to read a few verses of Scripture as we begin here today in Staffing for Growth, just to sort of have something in our mind as we go along. Take a look at Romans. I'm looking at chapter 12, he said, verse 6, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the proportion of faith. Ministry, let us wait on our ministering. He that teacheth, on teaching. He that exhorteth, on exhortation. He that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth with diligence. He that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Especially verse 10, be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. And if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if mine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. If thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Then I'd like to read couple of verses from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2, and chapter 5, verse 21. Well, I'll read 2 verses in 4. I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you're called, with all lowliness and meekness, with long-suffering and forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. In Ephesians 5:21, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. And then 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 11, Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as you also do. And then on over to 1 Timothy chapter 3. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into the reproach and the snare of the devil. Then in Titus chapter 1, verse 6, if any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of right or unruly, for a bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. And then finally, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2 and 3. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. So, when we talk about staffing for growth, I have a lot of soul searching, a lot of heart searching to do myself. Because I think that this is one of the greatest privileges that we have, is using our ability to help a church grow. And there's a saying that I heard, it's not original with me, but it is that there is a limit to what one man can do, but there's no limit to what a man can get done. And this has been a motto that I've wanted to latch on to and make it a part of my ministry. There's no limit to what a man can do. I firmly believe that. And I guess we all have someone that we saw that got things done in our lives somewhere or other. My mother was a little woman. She probably weighed 110 pounds. And Daddy died when I was 2 years old, and she was sick. And I can remember us staying where people would let us stay, and I can remember her forcefulness early in my life as a baby. And I remember her working for a veterinarian, keeping his invalid wife and milking his cows at the dairy and sitting me on a box, 2 years old, and the cows like to kill me and knock me off, and some boys rescued me. And my mother had so many experiences and places we went. I remember being sick for a year and going to the doctor, and I wasn't but just 2 years old. But she made an impression on me that never left me, that there's nothing that a person cannot get done, if they've got ability and if they try. And I remember that she married again when I was 3, and my dad was a rancher and a farmer, and he never had money because every time he got money, he bought a cow. My mother got so sick of him buying cows, she said, I want you to go to town with me today. And he said, what do you want to go to town for? She said, well, I want you to go with me to the bank. I want you to get me a line of credit. He laughed at her. He thought that was funny. He was twice as old as she was. He was 48 and she was 24. She had me and he had 8 kids. And she took on a lifetime job with those kids, and pretty good size undertaking. And so he thought it's funny. He went with her and got her a line of credit. And when we came home, our living room was full of groceries. Couldn't even get in the living room. She opened a store up. And we never had money until she opened that store, but after she opened that store, we always had money. And I learned in later years when my mother opened that store, she wanted some money to spend. So she just made a way for it, and she got money to spend. And had so much business till he built her a building, built her a nice store building, and eventually a feed and a fertilizer, and she had a good business. and I helped her with it until I went off to the war, and I developed a lot of respect for my mother. She could get anything done that she wanted done, and I don't know how she did it. We didn't have electricity. She washed every Thursday on a rub board, and we got up before school and drew the water out of the well and put it in a wash pot, put a fire around it, and did all that. She ironed on Friday. During the summertime, we worked in the field or the ranch or somewhere, and we had 15, 20, 30 people working. She always came with lunch right at time, spread a tablecloth on the ground, fed us all, got all the work done. I always wondered how she got all that done, but she knew how to manipulate people and get them to work for her. She knew how to get them to get things done. She had people that cleaned her house. She had people that helped her with work she couldn't get to. And she never took no for an answer from us. There was nothing that we couldn't do. In fact, she milked the cows until I was about 8 or 9, and then I milked the cows before I went to school and after I came in. I always thought, boy, I had more work to do than anybody. I thank God 1,000 times she made me work. She taught me how to do things and to get things done. All of us have to be exposed to it somewhere. And Jesus was no exception. He had a world to reach, and he couldn't do it in his body, so he had to get us to do it. He had to get somebody else to do it. And the problem when you got someone working for you is getting them to do it and to motivate them. And so how do we do it? That's the big problem. We all want churches, we all want growth, we all want revival, but we don't know how to get it. If I knew how to have revival, I'll guarantee you one thing, I'd have it. I'd never stop if I knew how to never stop having revival. And for the life of me, everything that I try that works for a while, I have to find something else. And it's working with a church staff is something that's absolutely essential, but it does present problems. Now let me tell you, pastors, it's easier for you to do it yourself, but there's just a limit to what you can do. If you do it yourself, it gets done better, but how much of it can you get done? And the problem with most of us is we don't know how to motivate somebody else to do something we ought to be doing, but we can't do it. It's got to be done, but you got to get someone to do it. And you got to be made aware of the problems you've got so that you can steer around the problems in your staff. The key to a man working successfully with a staff is his ability to avoid problems with his staff. And once you have staff problems, it bleeds into the church. And once it gets into the church, it can bring you more problems than you can handle right away. It can get out of control fast if you have someone that's not loyal, someone that isn't dedicated, and someone that's not doing it right. And I've listed a number of things here that are pertinent to it, the role and the title and misunderstandings that come as a result of it, envy and pride, failure to be open with your staff, failure to communicate with them, failure to stand in their shoes, defective principles in your staff that you allow to be there and don't do anything about, power versus authority in the feeling of staff members and even pastors having a fear of who has power and who has authority, and then failure to rationalize all of the coordinating of it. You have to get to the point that you can rationalize it. You know, the man that came to Jesus and he said, I am a ruler in Israel. I say go and they go, and I say come and they come. And Jesus said, I marvel. I have not seen such great faith in Israel. And this is what it takes. A man has got to delegate. He's got to delegate. And there has to be a time that we do these things. A man has to analyze, he has to deputize, and he has to supervise. You've got to analyze the people you're going to use, and you've got to know them. You've got to get you a radar screen set up in your head that you can see every weakness in them and everything about them, and if there's going to be any toe stubbing, you've got to see that to avoid the problem when it gets there. Say, how do you do it? I really don't know. But you've got to do it somehow. If we could tell you just how to be a successful pastor, everybody would be a successful pastor. And we all know that we're not successful pastors. We, everyone, get to the point that we feel like Elijah did almost. And dealing with a title, for example, can prove a problem, especially to people that carry a title. But it really doesn't make any difference to the congregation. There's one thing about a loyal congregation. They resent any member of your staff getting between you and them. They don't like that. They want to always feel like that they are closer to you than that staff. They don't want you to use a staff to get between them and you. They're very particular about that. You may think you've got them weaned, but let me tell you something, you haven't. They still want you. And they've got a way of letting you know it. And they'll say, when are you going to preach? We've been hearing all these others. We're ready to hear you. You've got to have a feeling for your people, but you've got to work with the staff. You've got to use them to help you and to help them. They're far more interested, your congregation is, in the depth of life that the person you've got helping you. They're more interested in that than they are his title. Their title really doesn't scare them a lot. And the style of the work that they've got. And the title that the person bears really doesn't cut that much ice with the congregation. There are any number of titles you can use for people that you got working with you, and I've listed some of them here. An associate, of course, we know is someone that shares power and authority. Then there's an assistant, there's a minister of Christian education, there's a pastor's assistant, assistant pastor, associate pastor, minister of music, outreach minister, minister of evangelism, and however many more, I don't know. I've just listed some of them here. But one of the most insidious enemies and dangerous enemies of the church and the individual, as well as the rebellion against the ministry, that can get in people is envy and pride. And it can get in church staff quicker than it can get any other place, it seems like. At one time, we've had a large church staff when our school was a lot larger than it is now, and it necessitated a lot of people. And you know, the first 2 or 3 years I had my school, I thought I had to be there every day because that's the way I'd been told, and I had to be involved in every problem that was going on, but I soon found out I couldn't do it, that I had to rely on someone else to do a lot of the things that had to be done. And I also found out that I could not have problem people on my staff because they created problems on the staff. And I remember one phase I went through that I needed a zipper for my mouth worse than I ever had, not to say the wrong thing. I wanted to say something so bad, but I was afraid what I said would be wrong and it'd blow the whole thing apart. Have you ever been there, Pastor, where you felt like that if you did something, it's going to blow it apart, and if you didn't do it, it's going to come apart? And you didn't know anything to do but pray. Well, if you haven't had staff problems, well, when you have staff problems, it'll get to that point. You get to the point you wonder just how much this staff member has told the others. And then others will come to you letting you know something's been told, and they don't want to squeal on them because they feel like they're brothers and sisters, you know. And boy, it's something else to have a staff, and it's great to have a staff, and you're not going to build a great church without one. You got to have a staff if you're going to really do a lot with the church. And so it's a potential spiritual problem. It continually can be there, and it can be so subtle and it be so hidden in the subconscious part of the mind that even if it is discovered, it's hard to bring it out in the open and deal with it. I've had some situations that if it hadn't have been for God, I don't know what would have happened to my church, and it had to do with my staff. I well remember one night, one of the most peculiar things in the world happened to me. I was standing right at the foyer waiting for the last retinue of the church to get out as we closed service, and all of a sudden, a member of the staff walked by. It was a wife of another member of the staff, and I just turned around, and when I did, my mouth just flew open, and I said, "There's something the Lord wants you to tell me." And she said, "Sir?" And I didn't even know I was going to say it. I hadn't even thought it. And she started crying and ran out the door. Well, I knew that I was really onto something. And so, and I didn't know what it was. And I mean, I was disturbed because I knew there was a little shakiness and a little trembling, and I didn't know what it was that I'd felt. Well, before daylight, the Lord had revealed the whole thing to me. And the way he did it, there was a lady in the church that really was my friend, and she'd picked up on something, and she called me about 2 o'clock. Said, "Did you know so-and-so?" I said, "I didn't know it specifically, but I knew it. I already had the feeling about it, and I've already mentioned something to the person." And so I got the whole story. And so I called up the other people that were involved right then. I didn't wait till daylight. I got them up out of bed and got her, and I got her husband, and got them to the church. And it had already gone so far, it had infected several other families in the church. Now this is staffing for growth. You know, this is what can happen to you in a staff, just over one person going bad. And out of all of the people that were involved, she was the only one that was really lost. Of course, I had to take proper measures, and you know, they came through it and all eventually, but it was really a turmoil and went on for some time getting over it. But you see, where they're in the staff, it gets there so much quicker. If you have an infection in your toe, you've got time to fight it all the way up the body before it gets to the brain. But brother, if anytime you have it in your neck or your ear, or up here somewhere, you haven't got very long. If you got gangrene down here, you might do something about it. But you get gangrene up here in your nose or somewhere, you haven't got long to check it. And that's the way your staff is. You've got to trust your staff, and you've got to believe in them. And but when it comes to potential problems and potential spiritual problems, if the staff person has a serious personal problem and fails to get it out, it will eventually bring hurt to the rest of the staff, and it'll bring frustration to the person involved and to the pastor and to the congregation, because it's so close to the brain. It's so close to the part that works. And communication is so important, and communication regarding the beautiful things about the body of Christ creates a sense of confidence in the congregation. That congregation, when they are in their spirit and they're led of you and they trust the staff and believe in the staff and everything's going good, it is so beautiful to see it work. You know, the thing that's so lovely and so beautiful is I never have to worry about my service starting when I have the right staff. My service starts on time, whether I'm there or not. And if I'm late, if somebody intercepts me, and it's not unusual for me to be intercepted, and if someone intercepts me and my staff is working like it should, that service goes right on. Everything's taken care of. And those parts of the service that they know that I'm the one that's going to take care of it, it's never touched. It's waited for until I arrive. And if I'm late, everything goes right on. And a minister has to have help in getting things done. And soul winning is the same way. And if we, in order to fail to communicate, the staff person should communicate in all activities, to avoid failing, I mean. He should communicate in all activities such as attention to the ministry, to the testimonies, to the singing, to the prayer times, to the conversation groups, to discussions about the scriptures, and all other church-related experience. You never want a person on your staff that does not get involved in the preaching ministry. When you're preaching, they need to be there. They need to be preached to. You know, you've got certain people can always find a job somewhere else in the church. You'll have people on your staff, if you're not careful, they'll have some office work to do while the preaching's going on. Don't allow that to happen. Don't put up with it. Sometimes I look and I see certain people that are missing, and they are key people. And I'll just call one of my assistants and I'll say, go into the rooms and the offices and tell people that are working there, I want them in church. It's important for your staff to carry that burden with you. As you preach, you want your staff there with you. If you have other people, we have to have people patrol the grounds. I don't know if you do or not, to keep them from carrying off tires, automobiles, batteries, and one thing and another. Those men have to be out on the grounds. We have no choice about it. They have to protect the property of the church. But your staff needs to be there for that pastor's ministry or whatever it is. They need to be there to give their testimonies. They need to be there to worship and singing. And they certainly need to be in the prayer room. And it's worth your time to make sure that you notice if these people are involved in these things, because they're working with you in your staff. Conversation groups. Did you know that conversation groups are the greatest soul-winning tool in a church? We've won more souls in our church through conversation groups than any other way. But if your conversation group is not under the right direction, now they're using it as a cell ministry. We call it conversation groups. But if you don't have the right person presiding, the conversation can go in the wrong way, and it can hurt the pastor, it can hurt the church, it can cause dissension in the congregation and cause people to lose trust and confidence in the staff of the church. I feel really that the staff that's working closely with a minister, a pastor in the ministry, that they need to, I don't really know anything about deacons, to be honest with you. I never have had any deacons in churches that I pastored because I don't know what they are. I know that they have a place in church. Please don't think I'm just being insulting. But what place do we have for a deacon to function if he's not a preacher of some kind? You know, we really don't need someone to tell us how to run the church if that's their job. Pastor's calling cuts across all lines of the church. Everything that's in it, he has to be directly involved in it. And people on his staff have to be so involved in his work, they are a continuation of his work. Recently, I went to a staff person, and this was a person we had on the staff in school, and she cut her hair. And she didn't say anything to me about cutting her hair. And so I found out she cut her hair before Monday morning. After Friday school was out, she cut her hair Saturday. And I found it out Sunday. I saw her walk Sunday morning across the front of the church on the way to Sunday school class, and I don't know, something just clicked, you know, and I'm not really too sharp in catching when women have cut their hair. Now, my wife can catch it real quick, or others can catch it, but I'm not too sharp on catching it. But I don't know, as she walked across there, something didn't look right, and I thought, what in the world's wrong with that woman? And so just a little bit later, I had some help. My supervisor says, "Say, have you noticed that woman's hair?" I said, "Yeah, I did, and I wondered what's wrong with it." She says, "Well, now you know." And so I called her. I said, "You cut your hair?" She said, "Yes." I said, "You have insulted me by cutting your hair. Not only have you broken the laws of God, not only have you failed the Lord and brought a reproach on your family and on the church, but you've insulted your pastor." She said, "How have I insulted you?" I said, "You are an extension of me. You are one of my arms in that learning center. And by you doing this, you bring a reproach on your pastor. And you have hurt me. And you have broken my heart." I did my best to just really let her know, you know, how it looked. And this is the way I feel about it. People we have assisting us in our staffs, they are our continuing work. That's what we use as a tool to reach out with. And if we don't have them as consecrated and as dedicated to the doctrine and to the standards and to the worship as we are, we're not getting the best out of them. Because the staff can bring you revival. And if they live where you live, they can definitely bring a move of God. And Jesus taught us that we should not judge another, because we really don't want justice when we're judging. We're not after justice. We're just finding fault most of the time. But most of the time, because of our own failures and our own shortcomings, we fail to see things from another person's viewpoint. It takes a lot of honest patience to see life through another person's moccasins. It's hard to feel what they feel and have the other person's perspective. And in dealing with the staff, it makes it more difficult with the pastor. He's got to try to walk in their shoes. They can't walk in yours, but you can walk in theirs and feel what they feel. I think some of the most rewarding times I've had is working with people on my staff that I have seen the Lord bring to the point that they share the ministry. I have a lady in my church right now that I depend upon. I depend upon her more than I have anybody in my school system, for example. And I have found her to be the most resourceful. I've found her to be the kindest. I've found her to be the strongest. I've found her to be the staunchest for my doctrines and the doctrines we preach and things of that nature. And I've seen her come from a little girl in the church up to where she is now. And she has a command of those people that she teaches, and they love her. They really look to her. They don't put me out of their thinking, and she in no way would. She builds me to the top. She lifts me up as her pastor. And when you've got people on your staff that they put you where you belong as a pastor, you've got a staff that not only is effective, you've got one that's powerful for God. And if you've got 5 people on a staff and all of you with the same convictions and the same burdens, you're going to do 5 times as much in reaching people in your church than you're going to do if it's just you. Defective principles can destroy a person's effectiveness for God. And principles, I think it's important. And I think the thing that counts the most is the worth of the person's commitment. You can tell whether a person's committed or not. James has reminded us that our years ought not to be an unchanging commitment of the Word of God. And the idea of commitment here is for each of us to have a biblical view and a demand in our heart and a conviction in our heart of our relationship to God. I've never been satisfied with anybody else's experience. I wasn't satisfied with my Holy Ghost experience completely until I had one at home by myself. I knew that it was real, but I knew that I'd had my experience at church. But the night I remember that we were home, and first time this had happened at home after I'd received the Holy Ghost, my wife was sick, and we were praying with her, and I'd gotten my mother-in-law to come. She was real sick. And we were praying for her, and it was after midnight, and all of a sudden I had a visitation of the Holy Ghost like I'd never had at home. And this did so much for me because I knew that this wasn't something that came because everybody else was together at church. This was my very own experience from God. And every staff member you've got needs to have a commitment to God that he has his own experience with the Lord that he can rely upon. They can't rely upon the Lord through my experience or through your experience or through your ability. I cannot help them from the standpoint of them feeling what I feel. They have to come to the place they have their own experience. But when they can commit themselves to God and they're experienced enough in that, they can make it. Who is it that really has success? The amount of success experienced in any ministry is related to the way the minister deals with authority. Who has authority? Who is successful in authority? How did he get his authority? How does he use his authority? What are his motives behind the way he uses his authority? And how do others look at and respond to this person's use of authority? It's a very critical thing that each pastor understand the lines of authority, because right here determines the rise and fall of the church, is in the use of power and authority. You say, well, I didn't know I had any power. You've got some power. You may not know how much you've got. I don't think we realize how much power that God gives us as a pastor. People respect the ministry. You may have some people that'll fight it, but people that come to church have a great respect for the ministry. I grew up in the Baptist church, and Baptists all do as they please, just about. But I'll tell you one thing, when the preachers came to our house, I respected them. I revered them. And I picked out my favorite preacher. I knew just which one I liked the best. And we had a lot of them that came because Grandpa was deacon in the church, and many times I might have to hunt another place to sleep. But nevertheless, I was always glad to see them come, especially the ones I liked. Now, them that I didn't like, I might not want them to have my bed. But the ones I did like, I specifically wanted them to have it. Now, as a Pentecostal minister, the greatest reward you can have is when God works through you to change a life. And you know that it was your ministry that God used to touch them. There are several kinds of authority here that's used, and we want to look at the 3 kinds for just a moment. There is coercive power. This is used to manipulate members without telling them what's wanted. Well, why? Well, bless God, because I said it. Now, we've all experienced that kind over the years at one time or another. Maybe some of you have never seen it, but I've seen some of that. Well, I don't have to tell you why. Bless God, I'm the one that said it, and that's the only reason you have to have. You ever seen parents tell their children that? I never corrected my children without explaining to them what it was all about and praying with them about it. And I think that we need to use authority If we're going to use it, we need to use it in a way that God will get glory from it. There are a few times when this kind of power should be used, coercive power. But it's really most of the time insecure pastors that use it. Then the second type of authority is derived through an institution that's organized, that organizes and ordains, and then because of the ordination and the office you hold, you have a certain amount of authority assigned to you for different functions and different persons and things like that. And there are a lot of occasions it will require this type of power. But it's never desirable, even for an office holder, to have to exercise his authority. How many people do you have in your church that have family problems just because the husband tells his wife, I'm the head of this house? Now, we all know that the Bible puts him the head of the house, but does him telling her he's the head of the house make him the head of the house? Some of the biggest troubles I have with families is the husband telling his wife, bless God, I'm the head of this house. Is he really? If he was, he wouldn't have to tell her. I've been married 43 years and 6 months, and I've never one time told my wife, I'm the head of this house. If she doesn't know it, I couldn't convince her by talking to her about it. But let's look at the third step. This is a step right here that's really important. It's the type of authority that is provided through ability. It comes through ability. Because a person is recognized by others to have a special degree of competence, others follows his lead. Only when ability and competence are demonstrated together and the endurance of competence is maintained through continued use and contact, people develop a respect for that type of authority. You know, we've all seen people that had it. They just had it when they walked before people. They seem to have something about them, that their humble spirit and yet their competence, they were so competent and able to do what they were doing until it was an authority that was given to them, but it was based on their ability and what they could do to produce a conformity that characterized the inner desire of that person to respond. You can't preach to people if you don't command an authority and some type of a power that's there. And it can't come from us. It has to come from God. And the most beautiful thing you'll see in your congregation is a pastor demonstrating the balance of his skill in his leadership and his love for his flock, and especially for the staff that works with him. You know what they'll do? They'll break their back for you. They'll do anything they can for you. They'll run and do errands for you. I had a pastor tell me, I drove up in my car and I had some things to get out, and by the time I got the door open and got it out, several people had been run there to grab it. Let me have this pastor, let me have this pastor, let me have this pastor. And this pastor was there preaching for me, and he said, how you get people to do that? He said, I never could get people to do that for me. I said, I don't know. I never told them to do it. I never asked them to do it. There's just something about it. I guess they want to help me. Maybe they feel sorry for me, feel like I'm getting old and decrepit and can't take care of myself. He said, no, there's something more than that. He says, I sensed something in those men that they wanted to do it. And with this kind of a relationship between each other, then all things are possible through a staff that they can work with you. Now, all of us will have different types of staff. Some of you may just have Sunday school superintendents. You may have youth leaders. You may have an assistant. You may have various officers in the church, and that's part of your staff because they work with you. They carry on the Lord's work in those classes when you're not there. Do you really know what's being taught in your Sunday school class by your staff person? Do you really know what kind of rapport he has with them? Occasionally, I let someone else teach my class. I still teach a class on Sunday morning. Occasionally, I let someone else teach a Bible class, and I slip into the other classes. Just slip in and sit down. I want to be there. I want to see what kind of rapport is going on. I want to see how the people handle the class, and I want them to know I'm interested. I want them to know if there's anything I can do to promote or help. I'm willing to do that. But it's necessary to rationalize the various activities and the various feelings between people, and you have to have a feeling for this. And you have to make an effort to let that staff member know you're deeply interested in what he's doing. A Sunday school teacher can lose complete interest if they don't feel the pastor's interested in what they're doing. And it's not always easy because we have so many things to do, we can't get to it all. And when it comes to administration per se, all administration that we do breaks down into really three things. There's three things it breaks down into, but it's four parts. Number one is ideas. And, of course, when it's put into effect, it's concepts. And then, secondly, it's things, or it's the operation of the event when it becomes reality, or it's people, someone to excite or motivate them to become involved in the work of God. Or then it's people where someone needs help to do some kind of work they're doing for you. They need to help get launched in some type of resolve or an event that they've got planned. But it's people all around. And every leader has to be concerned in all three of these. Everything we do is either in the field of concepts or ideas or things or operation or people or what's going on or activities. And a pastor is ineffective in his ministry if he neglects to deal with any one of the elements. If you leave the ideas off, you lose the base for what's going to happen, because ideas are the things that fill us up. That's the thing we live on. That's the thing that we live to do, is off of ideas. Ideas that come to us. How many times have you been sitting down, listening to a sermon, listening to a message, and all of a sudden an idea was born, something became alive in you? How many times have you been off somewhere and all of a sudden you had it? I'm going to go home and we're going to have revival. It began with an idea. If you have staff meetings and you meet with that staff and you pray with them and you deal with problems with them and you let them hear you talk, an idea can be born in them. They can carry many more messages than we can carry because they are so many of them and just one of us. But if we don't deal with all of the elements, then we lose something. But neither one of these elements is more important than the other. The seed of dissent and decay of a leadership lies right here, whether or not you do something about the ideas. There's got to be something to create life in them and make them come to life. Having a care for all of the areas. The thing that is important is a well-rounded ministry. If we don't have all three of them, our ministry is really crippled. And Jesus himself, he gave us many examples. His teaching is the finest that the world's ever had. And there's not very many people that have all four of the skills. Not very many people. You may find a few people can do anything, but not many of us can do everything. I can't play and I don't try. And I can't sing except to the Lord, and I don't try. And I don't have to have someone to come tell me, Brother McCoy, you ought not to be singing so loud because you get out of key. I don't have to have anybody tell me that. When I sing to the Lord, he doesn't mind. But when I try to sing with them, they may not like it. So I try to find where I can work and do my best at that. And this is the way every one of us needs to be. We can find someone else who can do something better than we can do it. If I want a song to be led or sung in the church, I very seldom lead it. Occasionally I might. But when I came to Port Arthur, I told them, I said, now, they asked me if I sang specials. I said, no, I don't. I said, I'll tell you who I sing like. I sing about like Brother Pugh. And they said, just forget it. And so there's some things we have to learn that other people do better than we do. And we can't do it all. It's good that we think we can do a lot of things, but we need other people to help us. But I think it's fascinating to look how Jesus talked about things. The overseer, he was the man of God. He had the theology, he had the philosophy, he had the rational thinking. He was God's agent to communicate the truth. He had the vision of the kingdom. He analyzed the need of society. He was able to apply it to where it was going to work. And that's the minister. That's where it comes from. And then the steward, you got him as an operational manager. He makes sure the vineyard's cared for. He makes sure it produces. He makes sure the ground is broken and no wasted energy. The seed's all put in the right place and the fruit is there. He sees that everyone takes care of his task and everything is in sequence and the harvest produces 100-fold. And so when it comes right down to it, it's a seed of the prophet that's going to be planted.